Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of My Philosophy Book. This week, while I was looking through my philosophy book, I found a chapter that is quite relevant to our world today, as is most philosophy. So let's jump straight into it. Now, the dynamics of human societies are very complex. Each society we see when we look back through history has been run in varying different ways in terms of how the government is run and how the people choose to behave, based on a set of moral guidelines that are accepted at the time. Despite this complexity, however, I think it is probably reasonable to say that in general, the societies that will last longer are the ones which are perceived to be just and fair. And that makes sense because you want to live in a society, in a place that feels fair, and you wouldn't want to live in a place that is run based on corruption and injustice. However, not only must this society be fair, but the members of this society must believe it to be fair. Because if you think about it, one of the most overused excuses is, well, someone else was doing it, so why shouldn't I, And when we see other people break the rules that we as a society have agreed upon, those rules become meaningless, and it disencourages others to break those same rules. So if we feel like we're living in an unjust world, it encourages us to act unjustly. But if we feel that things are fair, and there is a sense of justice and equality, we are more likely to emulate those qualities. So, the question is, how do we divide up the benefits and the burdens in our societies to make them fair? We could say that the only real way to truly have a fair and equal society is to share these benefits and burdens equally throughout all its members. Now, when I say society, it may sound quite big. Your mind may go to the society at large of a country, or even a city or a county, but let's condense it down. Think of the road you live on, right? This will be our society for this discussion. Now, if we share everything our society has, in terms of benefits, this being goods, money, food, if we share all this equally between everyone, in exchange that everyone on the road in our society does an equal amount of burden, of labour, of work required to produce these goods, is that fair? And superficially, it may sound fair that you gain what you earn through work. However, some might say that what makes these societies diverse and complex are the diverse and complex people who comprise them. For example, is little Johnny from next door with his broken leg and he's carrying himself around on a pair of crutches expected to do an equal amount of work as Chad next door, who is 25? He's peak physical fitness, he's got broad shoulders, he's got a chest like a barrel, he's got arms like legs, and he's got legs like double legs, Should they be made to do an equal amount of work? On paper, this is equal that two members of the society are doing the same amount of work. So let's say we agree that Chad is going to do most of the heavy lifting, while little Johnny is going to do what he can, but it won't be anywhere near as much as Chad does. So now we have two members of our society performing different tasks at different levels of difficulty, but receiving the same reward. And even though Chad is doing twice the work as little Johnny, he's receiving the same reward as everyone else, despite the fact he's putting in more effort. And one could argue that this is not fair, and go so far as to say that when someone like Chad, who is capable of putting twice the effort in, has no incentive for putting that effort in, is only going to work half as hard. Therefore, our society, our little road, gets less of the food and the goods and the wealth than it would have if Chad was working at his peak capacity. So then maybe the solution is to have equal opportunity for advancement within our little society. Even though some people may work harder, they will earn more, but everyone has the same opportunity to advance as anyone else. However, in my last episode, we did touch on the different kinds of freedom. And I suppose what could be considered a false freedom is if we look at an example in the USA. Now, it is a fact, and it's fair to say that any citizen of the USA is free to become the president of the United States. There is an equal opportunity to aspire to that position. However, in actual fact, many people are not capable of becoming president through either lack of connections, lack of funds, or of education, and these opportunities, which are supposedly equally available to everyone, we now see are reserved for a select few members in our society. This is when we come to a man called John Rawls. And what John Rawls gives us is his theory known as the difference principle. In it, Rawls explores equality, inequality, and justice. Rawls explores the idea that inequality, if it serves the interest of the worst off members of our society, can be just and fair. For example, if we look back at our own little society of our houses on the road, we are going to introduce a little scheme. So, as things are, Chad was born naturally fitter, stronger, and more athletically built than little Johnny next door. Little Johnny was born small and weak and simply unable to perform the difficult physical tasks that are expected of him. Now, because of these randomly obtained genetic attributes, Chad works twice as hard, thus earns twice as much. The scheme that we as a society have come together to institute is that we're going to take a portion of Chad's earnings and give them to little Johnny. Johnny cannot earn the benefits he needs by himself. Now, in terms of equality, Chad is doing twice as much work, but not being compensated as much as he would have been had things been the way they were before. Little Johnny is being given more benefits than he's actually earned. And this is what John Rawls tells us, that this inequality, which serves the worst off member of our society, is in itself just and fair. And we can see this in our own society, to expand it, with the likes of social welfare and the payments made to single parents or people with disabilities. These payments are funded by the tax of people who have earned the benefits for themselves. A portion of these benefits are being taken to help provide for the worst off members of our society. However, the problem with this concept, that inequality can, in certain circumstances, be just and fair, is evident throughout history. People have taken this message and twisted it to suit their own political and social agendas. An example of this can be found when we look at the economics of Reagan and Thatcher throughout the 1980s. The idea was put forward that if the wealthiest members of society were to be given tax cuts, they would have more money to invest back into the economy. This would in turn trickle down to the worst members of society, thus benefiting them. It probably isn't too difficult to see the problem with this system, though it's one that is probably recognizable to most people in the world. This type of trickle-down economics was dubbed horse and sparrow economics by J.K. Galbraith. It was called horse and sparrow economics because if you feed enough oats to a horse, some will pass through to feed the sparrows. Now, despite systems like these being prevalent in a lot of countries where the rich get richer and the lower classes and the worst off members of our society remain the same, many people seem unable, or even unwilling, to try and change this fact. I'm reminded of a quote by John Steinbeck, who once said that socialism never took root in America because the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. But not just in America. I believe in a lot of Western cultures, this idea of capitalism and that anyone can become rich and successful has taken on sinister new meaning. It seems most people now see themselves not as an exploited poor class, but as simply paying their dues until they catch their big break. Rather than try to improve everyone's lot in life, people are only interested in furthering their own gains, despite the fact that they have passively agreed to be a part of a system that actively denies their interests. This problem is most easily seen when you ask anyone how they feel about the idea that anyone in a society, no matter how hard they work, receives the same amount of reward. And thinking back to our little society on the road with little Johnny and Chad, and we think of that idea of complete equality, it may not sound too crazy, but expand it out to society as a whole, to the society you live in. And if you ask people, should everyone receive the same amount of payment, despite the fact that they might do a less challenging job, a less skilled job? And a lot of people will say no. And a common argument that one might put forward, and I've definitely heard a lot, is they say, should a janitor receive the same amount of compensation as a doctor? And I'm not saying that that isn't a compelling argument, because as humans it is true that we do need an incentive, and there should be a benefit to encourage hard work. The problem with thought like this is that most people are the janitor, but believe themselves to be the doctor. And like the temporarily embarrassed millionaires, they are lobbying for a group of people whose interests run contrary to their own for the simple fact that they live in hope of one day becoming part of that group. This system, which clearly favours the better off members of society, is what goes against everything John Rawls proposed in his difference principle. Only in the event where inequality serves the worst off members of society is it justified. Otherwise, equality of opportunity, benefit, and burden is always preferable. And to help articulate his idea, John Rawls brings us a thought experiment known as the veil of ignorance. To have social justice, each member of that society must be impartial. If there is any preference toward any one political group or social class, then that society is not fair and it is unjust. Try to imagine waking up in what John Rawls calls the original position. So imagine you've woken up on a desert island and you have no memory of who you are. You don't know your place in society. You don't know what your position or your social status is. You don't know how much money you have compared to anyone else, and you don't know what abilities you have. You don't know what you're good at, whether you are smart and intelligent compared to the others. You don't know what skills you have that the others lack. Now, without any of this knowledge, when moving forward with our society, we are forced to play it safe. We can't lobby in the interest of any one particular group, because giving any one particular group an advantage may give a disadvantage to a different group. Because we don't know which group we belong to, we can't afford to give any one group more power or take away power from another. The best option would be to try and ensure every group is equal. And this is the idea that John Rawls tries to stress, is that remaining impartial would seem the rational thing to do. And what Rawls goes so far as to say is that a rational decision maker in this situation would rely on this difference principle to ensure their best interests for the future. The idea that inequality can be just and fair only if everyone profits by it. Otherwise, equality, complete equality, should prevail.